You haven't eaten in 2 days. You know where the herd is. You tracked it yesterday. You found the prints. The route is mapped in your head. All you have to do is walk there. Then it starts raining. Not a drizzle, a heavy, wind-driven rain that doesn't stop. It goes all day, then all night. Then the next morning, it's still going. Now you can't hunt. The tracks are gone, washed into mud. You can't move across open ground because wet rock and bare feet mean a twisted ankle. And out here, a twisted ankle means death. The river near your camp is rising. And the fire, the one thing keeping you warm, keeping predators away, keeping you alive, is starting to struggle. You are not bored. You are trapped. For most of human history, rain wasn't an inconvenience. It was a crisis. And what people did during that crisis might matter more than anything they ever did on a clear day. Here's the strange part. Today, when it rains, you close the window, make coffee, grab a blanket, and open Netflix. Rain makes you feel calm, sleepy even. You might not make it through the episode, but 50,000 years ago, that exact same sound, the one you're falling asleep to right now, could kill a person 3 different ways before it even stopped. The first way is cold. A wet human loses body heat up to 25 times faster than a dry one. Without clothing, without waterproof shelter, a long rainstorm in anything below about 50 degrees Fahrenheit could push a body into hypothermia within hours. And most places our ancestors lived got that cold at night, even parts of Africa, at higher elevations during the wet season. The second way is flooding. Caves and rock shelters, the main places humans lived, sit at the base of hillsides or next to rivers. Heavy rain means flash floods. Archaeologists have found thick layers of flood sediment inside occupied caves. Water came in while people were still living there. And here's the unsettling part. Some of those caves were never used again. The third way, maybe the worst, is predators. Rain drives animals into shelter too. Sometimes that shelter was the same cave. In South Africa, there are cave sites where human remains and large cat remains show up in the same layer. Some of those human skulls have puncture marks that match leopard teeth exactly. So rain didn't just make life uncomfortable, it compressed the entire world. Humans, predators, and prey, all squeezed into the same small dry spaces at the same time. And in the middle of all that, one job mattered more than anything else: keeping the fire alive. Here's why that job was terrifying. We know humans controlled existing fire at least 400,000 years ago. A cave in Israel called Kesem has the evidence. Some researchers push that back even further, to nearly 1,000,000 years at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. But controlling a fire that already exists and creating one from nothing are 2 completely different skills. For most of human history, most people probably couldn't do the second one. Which means, if your fire went out, you might not get it back. So groups carried embers, wrapped in green leaves, packed inside a fungus called tinder fungus that could hold a smolder for hours, basically a biological lighter. We know this wasn't guesswork because of one frozen man. When researchers found Otzi the Iceman, 5,300 years old, preserved in the Alps, he had a complete fire kit in his belt pouch: tinder fungus, flint, iron pyrite for sparks, backup plant tinder. Even 5,000 years ago, losing your fire was serious enough that people carried dedicated equipment to prevent it. So when the rain hit, shelter wasn't the first priority. The fire was. Move it deeper into the cave, shield it with hides, feed it, not too much, not too little. Find dead branches still under the forest canopy, still dry underneath. Split open wet logs to reach the dry wood inside. Use birch bark, because birch contains a compound called betulin that burns even when it's wet. Somebody's entire job during a rainstorm might have been sitting by that fire for hours, feeding it, watching it, because that fire was warmth, light, safety, cooked food, and every social interaction the group had, all in one place. Letting it die wasn't careless. It was potentially fatal for everyone. So the fire is holding. You're mostly dry, but you can't leave. What do you do now? You make things. The archaeological record is packed with it. Stone tools in every stage of production. Piles of tiny flaking debris, the chips that fly off when you're shaping a blade, concentrated in exactly the spots where firelight would reach. But it wasn't just stone. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found a 100,000-year-old workshop for making ochre pigment, abalone shells used as mixing bowls, ground powder, bone tools for stirring and applying it. This wasn't survival. This was production. Someone sat in that cave, probably while rain hammered outside, and manufactured pigment on purpose, with a process. Then come the needles. Bone needles start showing up around 61,000 years ago in South Africa, later across Europe and Asia, delicate tools with tiny drilled eyes. You don't make one of these while running from something. You make it sitting still, for hours, with nowhere to be. Rain gave people those hours. Then, at Hohlefels Cave in Germany, they found something else, a 35,000-year-old tool carved from mammoth ivory, with 4 holes and spiral grooves, built specifically for twisting plant fiber into rope. Someone sat down and carved a dedicated rope-making machine. Rope making is slow, repetitive, it needs patience, which makes it the perfect bad weather task. And rope changed everything. It let you tie things together, reinforce shelters, build snares and traps, bind stone tools to wooden handles. An enormous share of early human technology runs on string. And string was almost certainly invented by someone stuck inside, waiting for the rain to stop. It wasn't only tools and rope either. People were making their shelters livable. At Sibudu Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found something nobody expected from 77,000 years ago. Bedding. Layers of sedges, rushes, and grasses, carefully arranged into sleeping mats. The top layer used leaves from a plant called Cape Laurel, a natural insect repellent. And the bedding was burned and replaced periodically to keep it clean. 77,000 years ago, someone was already doing pest control. But here's the turn nobody expects. Because everything so far, the tools, the rope, the bedding, that's the practical stuff. What came next is something else entirely. Art. Chauvet Cave in southern France holds paintings roughly 36,000 years old. Lions, horses, rhinos, bears, drawn with a level of observation that still unsettles researchers today. Some animals are captured mid-stride, muscles tensed, heads turning, the work of people who watched these creatures for thousands of hours, then recreated them from memory, underground, by firelight. Chauvet isn't alone. Lascaux, Altamira, and in Sulawesi, Indonesia, cave art dating back at least 45,000 years, making it the oldest known figurative art on Earth. Here's the detail that makes this genuinely strange. These paintings aren't near the cave entrance, where you'd actually shelter from weather. They're deep inside, sometimes hundreds of meters in, through narrow passages, in chambers you'd have to crawl to reach. Someone carried a lamp-burning animal fat into total darkness, and painted. Nobody does that on a good day, with clear skies and a fresh kill waiting outside. You do that when there's nothing left to sharpen, nowhere to go, and the rain has been falling for 2 days straight, so you go deeper into the dark and make something. We can't prove cave art was a rainy day activity, but the pattern lines up too well to ignore. The most creative explosion in human prehistory happened in exactly the places people were most likely to be trapped for days at a time. And that points to something even bigger. Rain might not have just created art. It might have created culture itself. Picture it. 15 to 30 people, forced into a confined space, for days, with nothing to do. You talk. You listen. Information moves. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Wiesner published a study comparing daytime and nighttime conversations among the Juhohansi Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert. During the day, people talked about practical things: land, resources, complaints. At night, around the fire, over 80% of conversation shifted to stories, songs, and ceremony. The firelight changed what people talked about. It softened faces, lowered tension, opened people up. The campfire wasn't just warmth, it was the original social network. And what got shared there wasn't small talk, it was survival knowledge. Where the water holds out in summer, which plants are safe, where the best flint deposits sit, how to track one specific animal. That's not gossip, that's critical information, moving from one brain to another, through speech alone. And beyond the practical, there were stories, myths. Explanations for where rain comes from and where it goes. Every culture on Earth has rain mythology. Someone invented those stories, and they almost certainly invented them while sitting in the exact situation the story was trying to explain. Here's how powerful that oral transmission really was. The oldest verified oral traditions on Earth, stories confirmed against real geological events, are Australian Aboriginal accounts describing sea level changes from roughly 7,000 years ago. Those stories survived 7,000 years on nothing but people telling them to each other, generation after generation. That kind of memory doesn't happen by accident. It only happens if groups spend enormous stretches of time doing exactly one thing, sitting together, telling the same story, again and again, until it doesn't fade. So rainy days weren't dead time. They were transmission time. The days when knowledge moved from old to young, when skills were taught by demonstration, when the group's shared memory got reinforced. Now here's the part almost nobody mentions. Rain wasn't always the enemy. After heavy rain, the ground softens, and soft ground means perfect tracks. Deep, clear, easy to read. You can tell exactly what walked past, how long ago, how fast, and where it was headed. Some of the best tracking conditions on Earth come right after a storm breaks. Rain also meant water. People could collect and store it, and some of the earliest campsites show rock depressions that fill during rain, a few of them apparently carved deeper on purpose to hold more. And rain meant food changed, not stopped. Mushrooms and certain plants explode into growth. Tubers pull easier from softened soil. Insects surface. In tropical Africa, termites swarm right after rainstorms, one of the densest protein sources available, requiring no tools and no weapons. You just pick them up. Chimpanzees still do this today. Early humans almost certainly did the same, at a much larger scale. So what did people actually do when it rained for days? Everything that mattered. They kept the fire alive. They shaped the tools for the next hunt. They sewed the clothing that would carry them through winter. They twisted the rope that held their shelters together. They ground the pigment they'd carry deep underground to paint animals on stone. They told the stories that carried survival knowledge from one generation into the next. And when the rain finally broke, they walked outside onto soft ground, covered in perfect tracks, and got back to work. Rain didn't slow them down. It gave them time to build everything that came next. Every tool, every piece of clothing, every story, every painting on a cave wall, all of it came from downtime. From the hours they couldn't go outside and had nothing to do but sit by a fire and think. Boredom didn't exist for them the way it exists for you. When your survival depends on what your hands make in the next few hours, you don't get bored. You get creative. And that might be the single biggest reason any of us are still here.